Hey guys, welcome back to another video, another live stream. I'm excited to have this live stream with you guys. I am pleasured to be joined by a friend of mine's, Orlando, a collector's dream, and we're going to touch on a topic which I had a few conversations with him, and we would just be passionate about this conversation. We would be on the phone for like an hour or two, and it wasn't just one conversation. It would be another phone call, and we'd be touching on this topic. And it was like, man, we need to go live and have this conversation with the viewers. And that's why I am going to be joined by my friend Orlando. So I'm going to bring him up right now. Here we go. Hey,
Hey,
Orlando.
James.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Great. I'm happy that you were able to join me.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate that.
Well, I briefed the viewers. I let them know that we had a few conversations, not just one, and it was based on the topic of pivoting. And they were so passionate that we felt inclined we should share this with the viewers, right?
Well, yeah, we've talked about it that, everybody pivots in the hobby. You
Right.
just don't get locked into one thing for your entire collecting life. And, you've done that and I've done that also in the past.
Right. So I guess ultimately, with that being said, do you think pivoting is essential for all collectors?
Well, I really think that people evolve. You change. When I started collecting, I was a kid. I was 10 years old. And now, I'm a retired,
Okay.
older guy. So my collecting evolved and it changed. And yes, you pivot. You at the beginning you collect certain things, then you change on to something else. And remember, it's not about the money. I don't really look at it that way. I look at what do you enjoy collecting,
Right.
And for me, I've been through a lot of different phases. I've been collecting now for over 50 years.
Right.
And it's gone through different phases, from
Right.
set collecting to player collecting, to a little bit of everything. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think.
Right. So I think with your wealth of knowledge over 50 years in the hobby, that can't be understated. It's people like you, Blue Jacket 66, John Mangini, Rick, like you guys are the pillars for us that we could pick your brains and just learn from your experiences. And for one to be able to share and basically our mindsets were equal when we were talking about this. It was amazing to me that I was able to basically see eye to eye with you, with someone that I respect so much, with all the experience that you have. So I guess let's go back a little bit and tell me like when you first started collecting, what was your collecting style like?
Well, I mean, you're going back to when I was a kid. I was started probably around when I was 10 years old. And at first, it was collecting packs. My friends lived across the street. There were four brothers, and they collected cards. We played Little League together. So I got into collecting cards. And we would just go to the corner drugstore, Budget Drugs, and buy packs. And then we would trade and all that. And then as I got a little older and started, a couple years into it, my first packs I remember was in 1968 and 69. And I had a few of those, but really my real collecting was 1970. That year, I mean, I remember mowing lawns and going to the drugstore and actually buying a box of cards, in those days, and just ripping wax, opening it all up, putting the players, looking at all the players, putting them in order, and trying to build the sets. Okay. So that's how I started. I started really as a set collector, a set builder, and my dream collection, is a collector's dream. That's my dream, was to collect all the sets from the 50s all the way on to, to those times it was in the 90s, around that time. Okay. So that was my goal, to collect all of that. And that's how I began. And I was able to accomplish a lot because of what happened. Luckily, luckily, and I thank my mom and my dad especially, he found my collection of cards from when I was a young kid,
Okay.
where I collected cards all the way through. I had all this, basically almost every set from 1970. I had some cards from 68 and 69, but mainly from 1970 through 74.
Okay.
I had virtually all the sets, all the cards, duplicates. I was able to build sets from those just from me opening packs. So I think everybody starts that way. Everybody starts ripping wax, opening packs, collecting. Maybe they get into collecting their different players.
Okay.
And so that's how I initially started, is that way as a kid, opening packs and putting sets together.
Now, was it just one sport, or did you do various sports? How did you collect and rip these boxes?
It was mostly baseball. I mean, I did collect some football
Okay.
and a little bit of basketball, but it was mostly baseball. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned other sports, because one of the things, one last set, and I evolved from set collecting, and then we'll talk a little bit more later, but now I'm not a set collector anymore. I sold off the majority of my sets, but there is one set that I am still building that I should hopefully, because I went to come see and got most of the ones I'm missing, is this set here.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Which is the 1971 football set. And that's the last set that I'm finishing, because it was almost done. I needed, less than 20 cards. I figured I might as well go ahead and finish it. And but I moved on from the set collecting phase of it and went into collecting more players, individual players. So I went on to a player run after that. By the way, here's the 71 and phase I started just 4 months ago before the National, was getting my raw cards slabbed.
Okay, beautiful.
That's what I'm doing now. My current phase right now.
Okay.
I have so much vintage that I'm getting it slabbed, because a lot of it, not all, most of it's going to stay in my collection. But as I'm evolving and I'm going for certain other cards, some of these cards I may have to, probably will have to sell.
Okay.
Like I did with a lot of my sets, and how I built my collection basically was, I started with a player run of Mickey Mantle, because Mickey Mantle was really, in ththose days, was the best liked player. He wasn't the best player, but everybody liked him. Everybody wanted Mickey Mantle. I had a lot of Mickey Mantle cards, most of them in rough condition. But I figured, I'm going to start the run, and I did that, started with the player runs.
Right.
After that, I moved on and started with specific sets that I really, really wanted. And the other sets I really didn't want, I was going to move on. Because what ended up happening, James, is that it got to a point where I had built almost every set from the 60s already. I needed a couple more to finish off. And I had built a few sets from the 50s. I had the 53 Bowman. I had the 54 Bowman. I had the 57 Tops.
Okay.
I had the 58 Tops, the 59 Tops. I had all those built. But when I got to some other ones, it got to a point like the 52 Top set you're building today. Even back then, the common players were super expensive, and they've always been expensive. And I was thinking, I'm paying a lot of money for common players, which really I'm not too fond of.
Okay.
And so my set collecting evolved, because it got to a point where set collecting became a little more expensive. You can get commons for super, super cheap when I started. I mean, pennies, you know what I mean? But now, or in the last 5, even 10 years, it's become a lot more difficult. So I moved on to to something different, you know. And I sold my sets, and as I sold my sets, I kept some of the key stars. I kept all my mantles. I kept, you know, like the Mays, you know, my favorite player, the Brooks, you know, and I kept a lot of those, but I sold the majority of the sets. I broke them up, sold them on eBay, and got the money to get to my real dream, collecting my dream collection. So
which is your next pivot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you went from set building. One thing I wanted to touch on base before we move on from that phase was you have all your cards in binders and now you're grading them little by little, as from what I'm gathering. Can you still appreciate them now that you're taking out the binder and they're like separated per se? Can you still like appreciate them like that?
Yeah, I can. It's, you know, it also gets to be a lot. You know, I moved from Tampa to Miami, and I moved from Miami to Tampa, and back to Tampa, and back to Miami, and I've moved. So during all that time, it gets to a point where you got a lot of stuff. You know, you don't realize how much you have. And I had binders and binders and binders that I really didn't have a room at that point to put them all in.
Right.
So I ended up, some of the sets that I personally said, you know, I'm never going to sell these too much, and I'm going to hold on to these. My original sets, especially my original set from 1970, I never put that in a binder, but all my other sets were in binders. And eventually I put them back in, you know, I put them in holders like this. You know, I just keep them like this.
Okay.
You know, I keep them here. These are just in a box. I took all the stars out of the sets, and, you know, I look at those and I put them in a box. But I didn't do, I still, one of the things, if you looked at my last video where I went to the card shop and I filmed in the card shop, the reason I went to the card shop was I had to get some supplies, because my 1970 set, it's still raw. I started putting some here, but look, see, I have never actually even put these in top loaders, not even penny sleeves yet.
Okay.
And I'm beginning to do that now. So a lot of these sets, I put them away, and I just really didn't look at them too much. So I ended up, after putting them all back in little boxes, I penny sleeved them all up, put them in boxes, except for the 70 set, which I'm doing now. And that's how I've kept my sets. And along the way, I've broken the sets and went on eBay, did a set break, kept the stars, most of the stars, sold it out, used that money to go forward into my evolution of my collection.
So I guess you went from accumulating so much stuff, then you decided to try your hand at dealing, I'm gathering, right?
Yeah.
What was that journey like?
Well, you know, when my dad, many years ago, he found my collection of cards from when I was a kid. And I had moved away already. He called me, or my mom actually called me and said, you know, mi hijo, my son, mi hijo, your baseball cards, we found them. Your dad was going to throw them away. So I went over there and I got them, and I had literally like 5 shoe boxes full of cards,
Right.
all from the 60s and 70s. And I had tons of doubles and things like that. And I decided I'm going to go to in those days, the shows were at malls, mainly. They had small shows in small convention centers, but a lot of them were at the mall.
Right.
So I took cards out there. I got a little table and started doing that.
Okay.
And I noticed that the most important thing that I enjoyed was dealing with the people, but buying more than the selling. And that's one of the things that got me started. So I made some little business cards, and my business was this was in the late 80s, and it was a collector's dream, because it was my dream to build my collection, a collector's dream. So that was the name of my little business. So I started doing that, and I did a lot of different card shows. I would do a lot of them with that were sponsored by Rich Klein, that passed away recently, Hollywood Collectibles. He had a lot of small shows or different shows in the area where he bring in signers, and he did a lot of mall shows. So I would do all those shows, and I'd bring my little kids there, my wife. But what I enjoyed about those shows was that I would end up, at the end of the day, you end up with a couple $100, and my wife's like, "Oh, you only made $200." Yeah, but really, I would sell like $1,000 worth, and I would spend like $800 worth in buying, because that was really the stuff that would come in that people, and this was back in the late 80s, people would bring cards in from their collections. And I mean, I bought a lot of really, really nice cards and sets in those days. I had one guy that brought me an entire 1962 top set, which I still have. One of the nicest sets in the nicest condition you'll ever imagine. It was his when he was a kid, And so you would buy. So the shows for me was getting contacts and buying from the people that came up, and made sure I always made a little bit of a profit, because I'd have to show the wife that I made a little money. But the bottom line was I was building my collection. And that's how I built a lot of my collection. I built it up that way, and buying and selling at the card shows.
Did you see a lot of like rare stuff cross your hands that you didn't think you'd ever see? Like, was it awe-inspiring?
I sure did. And I'm glad you asked that question. We've never talked about this, but I'll tell you, James, one of the things that got me so excited in going back, because I evolved from going from cards from the 70s to the 60s to the 50s. And then I evolved from going cards even older than that, and I started really, this card here was my first card that I consider was like my oldest vintage card.
Wow.
I had never had a card from the 40s like this ever. And when I got this card, it got me so excited to go back and look at history and go back and read more about Joe DiMaggio, because of course I never saw him play, but for me, it was all about history. And, I was a Yankee fan and, a Mickey Mantle fan too. So I kind of, it got me going back. And in one of the shows, one guy came in and brought me a little lot of about 20 cards of this 1888 Goodwin Champions.
Nice.
I just recently got, this was raw. I just recently got this one graded at SGC about 4 months ago. Look at these cards. Look at the quality of the cards. Look at the printing and the colors on that card. Right. I mean, this set was from 1888. And if you can imagine, these things were actually hand done. And I just love these cards. I love this little set. And I got about 20 of those and I put them away. Wasn't too interested at the time, even though they were beautiful. So I kind of put them in my PC. I didn't put them back up for sale. I just put them in my PC, kept them there. And then I came back. Eventually, I came back to those. The deeper I got into the more vintage, as I sold off my stuff, I started going from the 40s. Then I started getting into the 30s, and I started picking up things like this.
Let's take a look at this one.
And I started actually trying to do this set. And I had picked up a bunch of commons and stuff. And, I got to a point where, I was like a third of the way. And I said, you know what? That's when I said, I'm just going to go for the stars now. I'm going to go for the top people, And that's where my pivoted. I truly pivoted from sets to stars more of the 50s and 60s to older stars. And then my current pivot is now to the goat, of goats, Here's a nice one. You probably never seen this.
Wow.
That's a 1949 Leaf. It's a Babe Ruth, and this is the with the white back, which is pretty
Wow.
rare. So what happened to me is that I got into the older rare stuff, and I said I'm going to sell off a lot of stuff. And what happened with these are actually, guys, these are 49 cards. They're not 48. They're no 49. They were made in 49. You know, when I got into looking at these, I had a few of these cards. I never got the big guys other than DiMaggio. But when I got into looking at those, I found that there were premiums in that box. There were cards that were actually put into those boxes, and it seems like they were put in the first series and in the second series, which is the short print series.
Okay.
And I found that there were two different kinds of boxes. So I really got into that set. One day I was at a show. I was attending a show, and a guy walks in. A guy waiting to get in behind me had a box of cards, and we were waiting to get into the show. It was just about to open, and you know, in those days, some of the shows charged like $1 or something like that to get in. So he was behind me, and I asked him what he had, and you know, he said, "Oh, look what I got," and he actually had a box of 49 Leaf cards, and these premiums. And I asked him, you know, what are you going to try to sell them? He says, "Yeah, I'm going to try to sell these." I said, "Listen, I'll buy them off you."
Right.
You know, but this is a really good collection. You know, he had almost a box full. He must have had over a couple hundred of the 48 Leafs. And I looked through them. He let me look through them. They weren't even in penny sleeves. And the DiMaggio was there, and Robinson, all of that. But what ended up happening, he went into the card show. This was in Tampa, in Brandon, Florida. And this was in, I think, somewhere around 1990 or 92, somewhere around that area. In Brandon, Florida, he went into that. It was like an auditorium, like a gym, right? He walked into that gym, and he was going, and I was looking at my cards. You know, I saw him going in, showing them to different dealers. And I told him at the end of the show, I mean, at the beginning of the show, I said, "Listen, if you don't sell them, you know, let me know, you know, or if you think you got a low price or whatever, let me know. I'll buy them off you, you know." Mm-hmm. So he goes down, and then all of a sudden, you know, I see he gets near the end of the one lane there, and like 5 different dealers gathered up around him. They're all looking at all the cards, and they're pulling all these cards. They're all freaking out. And because, I mean, 49 Leaf cards, you know, or 48, you want to call them, but they're 49 Leaf cards, a whole box full. Well, anyway, I caught him near the end of the show. And I said, "You know, what happened with those Leaf cards?" He said, "I sold them all. The dealers went crazy. I got a ton of money." In those days, you know, it wasn't a lot of money, I'm sure, but it was a ton compared, because those were rare. Everybody knew those were always rare cards.
Right.
So he had sold them all. But he says, "I didn't sell these posters." And I said, "Well, I'll buy the posters off you." Well, make a long story short, I had run out of money, you know, because I had already gotten some cards from the show. Right. The guy wanted $300 for the posters. There were 12 of little posters, 12 of these. 12 of these.
Wow.
Okay.
Those are gorgeous.
This is in a 5. This is the highest graded.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that is gorgeous.
So this guy sold me like 12 of these. Some were not in great condition and stuff, but he sold me these. And I love them so much that I said, "I'm going to go for this set. I'm going to start collecting this set." Mm-hmm. I went to the National in 1992 in Atlanta when they had the Olympics. I went to the National. I took some of those posters to the National, and I was able to sell some of those posters and trade a few of those posters. I traded one of the Garricks. I had a couple of Garricks for some really nice stuff that I wanted, which were some autograph press steel cards. And that got me into the autograph area, because I did pivot into autograph at a certain point in my career. But going back to these 49 Leaf cards, Let me show you something you've never seen. This is the top of the box for the 49 Leaf. This is what those cards came in. They came in the box. This is the back, but this is the top of the box. And it says on there, All-Star pictures. So you can see how many cards were in the pack there. Tells you right there.
5.
And then this, it says free big picture.
Okay.
Right. I can't read it backwards, but it says that I think to the last person who buys the pack in the box, they get a big picture. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what you got. That's the big picture you got.
Wow.
So out of these cards, I said, you know what? I'm going to start collecting those. And I did. And I virtually had the whole set from the guy because the set is only 8 players. But there were 2 variations. And that's why I had picked up this one at auction. Yeah, this is rare. There's probably less than 10 of these known. And then I was lucky enough to get the rarest card of them all, which is this one here.
Wow.
Which is the blue background.
Wow.
And this one isn't a 4. This is the highest graded. Not only is this the highest graded, but there's only, if you look at the pop reports, there's less than 5 of these known by any grading company. And these came inside the box of the 49 Leaf cards, 1 per box. And my assumption, and you can't prove a lot of this stuff, other than that they were in 49, because there are people that are alive today that pulled those cards in 49, not 48.
Okay.
So, but my assumption is that these cards probably were in the first series.
Okay.
Is what I think. There's a roof of this also. I also have the roof. And I think that these rare ones probably came in the short print series or in the higher series, because like I said, these are super, you don't see them. You don't see them ever. So,
yeah.
So I focused on that and I completed that set and I became the #1 PSA Registry 49 Leaf Premium set.
Wow.
And I sold some sets and some things to get those, but I was able to pivot my things to a little older stuff. And then I pivoted away to these cards.
Okay.
And because I love that set, I had some of the set already. So I got them graded. And little by little, I started just looking into those 1888 Goodwin Champions. And what I love about those cards is that not just that they're handmade, but the color on those cards are just incredible. If, like this Cap Anson.
Oh my gosh. Look at this thing.
I mean, these cards are so beautiful in my opinion that, I mean, I just love this set. And what I did was I pivoted and I said, you know what? I'm going to focus on basically 3 things in my collecting career or whatever, my collecting dream. By Mickey Mantles, which was my #1 goal, to do the Mickey Mantle run, which I did, to get the 49 Leaf Premium set complete with the rarities.
Okay.
And to complete the 1888 Goodwin Champion set. So I had to sell off a lot of my sets from the 50s and a lot of the sets from the 60s to get cards like the Cap Anson and things like that, and to get basically my 52 Topps Mantle.
Okay.
I gave up a lot for that, but it was worth it.
So, wow, you stated a lot. I'm curious. You have a lot of those cards preserved and slabbed. How you watched like the evolution of the hobby just get jolted with grading? What do you remember about grading and how it impacted the hobby?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, it was really not a thing to grade your cards. And let me tell you, 99% of the only thing I got graded in those days, back when PSA kind of started, were my Mickey Mantles, and a few other major cards that I had. But very, very few cards would I even grade. I remember that I was looking at my 1959 set, and that's one of the sets that I did keep that I didn't sell. Everything else from the 50s is gone now, all my sets. So I remember going through that 20 years ago at least, and what am I going to grade? And I ended up grading 3 cards from the whole set, and that was the Mantle, the Clemente, which I love Clemente, and the Gibson rookie card. And that's it. And really, I didn't submit a lot to PSA back then. I really did very little. I just did what I needed to do to do the registry, you know. So, but all of my other cards I've kept raw. Okay. And like I said, I just started recently. I started about 5 months ago, is when I decided, kind of another little pivot here, and I'm gonna start grading my raw vintage cards. And I was able to do that and move some cards at the National, and pick up some stuff like you saw that I picked up at the National, the Mayo Cup Plug Anson that I picked up. That was my big pickup. Wow. And those were, so eventually I'm moving into some bigger stuff, and that way I'm gonna have to be, probably moving some other cards, and some of these guys start, I'm getting them graded, because you know what? I graded some of these, like my 62 set. I mean, look at the condition I got on some of these.
A 7.
These were raw as of a few months ago. And here's the #1 card in the set, which I pulled out because of the judge.
Okay.
A lot of these came out in high grade. So I'm, I'm not looking to sell them, but to get the cards that I really, really want, eventually I will sell them.
So let's get back into pivoting in general. So some people like to call it like a new rabbit hole, or just changing focus. I just like to use one word: pivoting. And some of it has to do with like the climate, with the hobby, as you saw with the COVID, how prices just skyrocketed. And now they're actually doing a little correction / dipping, but everything goes in waves. And I find that if you're doing a collection, like what you mentioned, you were working on collections and stuff like that, sometimes you hit roadblocks, and pivoting is a great way not to stop collecting. So just because you hit a roadblock doesn't mean you don't enjoy the hobby anymore. You just find a new focus and something else to keep you occupied. And then sometimes you learn, like what you said with the pre-war cards, it opened up a new world and you fell in love with it. A lot of the pre-war cards, like with some of the cards you illustrated there, Goodwin Champions and such. So do you think a lot of people are stubborn with pivoting?
Well, it's difficult to pivot when you've been accumulating something in a certain way and all of that. Some of us collectors, in some ways, we kind of are OCD. You know what I mean? We get used to certain things, used to certain ways, but you have to look at yourself and your collection. And you also, you look at trends and things like that, but you know what? You don't have to follow the crowd. Actually, I don't follow the crowd. I follow what I enjoy, and, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But the bottom line is you have a collection that you love. And that's what this hobby is all about. People tend to forget that the bottom line, guys, is this is a fun hobby. I always love to watch John Mangini, where he says, you know what I like to do after having a horrible day at the office? I like to look at the baseball cards. Why? Because it takes you to another world. It gets you away from all of the problems, all the inflation, all the negativity. You kind of get into your own world. And that's what I enjoy about the hobby. That's what I love about this thing. And the more history you study, the more you learn, the better it is, James. And the more excited you get about the hobby, and then you pivot because you learn more and you learn history and what people have accomplished in history. You know, there's a lot of players that people have never heard of and are people that are the pioneers of baseball. And that really is what got me going, because I love baseball. I've always played Little League, you know, never was good enough to do much, but I played and I love the game. So I love the history. I love to go back and collect those players that made history, like the Babe Ruth. And you saw, hopefully you saw the video I did a few last week. Showed one of my Babe Ruth cards there. Yes. And that was one of my pivots. You know, I've always wanted Babe Ruth. I sold off some stuff to get a Babe Ruth card. And now I thank God I own 3 Babe Ruth cards. You know, I was lucky that I came in at the right time, you know, but it was not because of the timing. It was just my phase. You know, I just was going through that phase. And people forget that the hobby is all about the game, and just learn about the game. I'm going to show you one card that nobody even knows. Well, a lot of people do know if you know history, but some people don't even know who this gentleman is. King Kelly.
That's a beautiful card. Look
Thank
at those
you.
clouds.
This is one of my favorite cards. And the reason I brought this card out, and I brought a few other of these cards out, is I'm doing a video. I just did the video today, and I'm going to post it tomorrow. And the video is on my 5 favorite cards. Not necessarily the more expensive, but my favorite cards. And this is one of my favorites. This will be in the video. And the reason it's one of my favorites is not just because it's a beautiful card, but King Kelly was a pioneer of baseball. And, you know, that's what I call these guys. These are the pioneers, guys. They go back to the 1800s when baseball started. And right. King Kelly was Babe Ruth before Babe Ruth. He actually was a famous star in his days. And unfortunately, he passed away when he was 36 years old. Similar to the Lou Gehrig situation, he had tuberculosis. But he passed away fairly young. But this guy, the first supposedly hit song that was created was Slide Kelly Slide. And this was in the country. And it was because of him. He was one of the premier players. He was a premier base stealer in those days. I mean, they played less games. There was one year he almost stole 100 bases. And he invented what's called the hook slide. The hook slide, he created the hook slide. He was the person, one time a poet. These are old stories. You can read them. They're in Wikipedia and they're in all this stuff. One of the famous poets in those days went to see him play in 1888, in the year that card came out. And he, when he got out of the game, he wrote a poem about that situation. And the poem was Casey at the Bat.
Oh, nice.
Casey at the Bat was written for King Kelly.
Wow, hold that up one more time. Man, look at the background.
Is that a beautiful card? I fell in love with these cards because just the artwork on these is just incredible.
Terry was just in love with the background. He wanted to know a little bit more. That's why I asked you to hold it up one more time for Terry. And with that, I want to thank a lot of the guys watching, the viewers, Pick a Jim S, Terry, Dylan, Doug, I see Bink, Scott.
All right, all my buddies are here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, John Mangini is in the house.
I love John.
Some ball cards. So many people. Chris R. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, and John got a new chess table, I heard. Right, John?
He's a chess master over there.
He used to play. I love chess.
I'm scared to play John because he's been tutored by champions.
No, and I'm sure he's practicing again.
So now we discussed several points about pivoting, and I last touched on if you're stubborn. you're obviously very knowledgeable now because you collected that Joe DiMaggio, opened up a new world for you with pre-war, and now you're like very astute with baseball. That's what pivoting alludes to, right? It just broadens your horizon, introduces you to new avenues, and it just like opens up a new world for you, and you become smart with it, right?
Yeah, you learn and you study, you know. I mean, that's one of the things that I love. It's just going back in time, and you put yourself back in those days, you know, in the 50s or in the 40s or in the 30s. The cards take you back in those days. And if you know the player and you read about them, I mean, you almost feel like you're back in those days. You know, I talked about Cap Anson and King Kelly. I mean, these guys, they were in horse and buggy, you know, and Kid Kelly literally had his horse and buggy possessed. They repossessed it because he didn't pay a bill. You know, so
God.
you can imagine it's like, you know, these in those days, such different time, but you put yourself back in those days, and that's really what the hobby to me is all about. You know, is learning about history, learning about the different players. And when I started my YouTube channel, you know, everybody goes through tough times and you know, in their lives. And you know, last year, you know, I'm going to ramble a little bit, but last year was the toughest year of my life. You know, even though my cards probably went a lot in value, you know, my dad passed away last year, unfortunately, and I had two friends of mine that had breast cancer, and one of them passed away, and
Wow.
the other one, you know, fortunately is cured, seems to be fine, you know. But those things kind of inspired me to, you know, I have to do something, you know, and I just felt that my life was kind of going down. Believe it or not, I had long hair at that time. You know, I was kind of you let yourself go. You know, you're still in the collecting thing, but it wasn't, you know, it was one of those things you put in the back burner, you know. And then they encouraged me. You know, I got really into my collection because of some you know, you get depressed and stuff, you get really back into my collection. So last year I really got back to pulling everything out that I had out of the closets, out of the storage, out of everything, you know. And since I really couldn't, because of COVID, I had a lot of my nice stuff in safe deposit box, and I really couldn't go out and get it, you know. And I decided, you know what? I hadn't seen those cards. I hadn't seen my cards. I'm going to just, you know, put them on video and just do a video for myself at the very least, and just look at my collection and talk a little bit about it, you know. So that's what got me started. And, you know, my friends encouraged me, it's either now or never, you know, time is short in your life. So you got to move on with it. And my daughter surprised me and set me up with this YouTube channel. And I started in January with it. She recorded my first video, and I've been just showing cards. And, you know, you asked me why I chose a 62 set to keep. And it's because, first of all, it's one of my favorites. I love the wood borders on that set. You know, I just love the look. If you look at all the cards from the 60s, I mean, the 68 is similar, but it's not the same. If you look at all of the cards from the 60s, in my opinion, I mean, I like the 65 with the little flag. I like some of those, but nothing beats, to me, nothing beats the beautiful 62s. It has kind of like a flap over here where it shows the name. And it was one of the sets that I actually had in such good condition. I couldn't get rid of it. I loved it, and it was one of the top condition sets that I had. And, you know, I kept that 62 set, and it's the only set from the 60s that I still have.
So that's a beautiful set, to say the least. And especially when you have it in high grades and minimal chipping, they just pop. So I could understand why you chose that to be the one you wanted to keep. So you were saying that when you were depressed, it helped you, I guess, help with the isolation, I guess, because when you get depressed, you isolate yourself, and you use the cards as therapy, maybe?
Yeah, you know, I mean, my father had Alzheimer's, you know, so I retired about 4 years ago to spend, the rest of my life or time with him and my mom. My mom just turned 93 years old now, so thank God I have her. But so I what I would do a lot of times is I would bring the card to show him. He got to a point where you can communicate with him, but he really couldn't communicate too much. But he loved cards, and I showed him the cards, and I would take cards. I'll show you an example. I just was going through his stuff the other day, and I had given, I would give him cards of Cuban players because that's who he liked. And I went through his putting all his stuff away and all that. It's been about a year now that he passed away, and I found these two cards in his stuff.
Nice.
All my dad's things. He had all of this, but I would go and I would show him cards. I would bring some of my cards, and we would spend time together, show him cards, and that was one of the things that helped me and helped him. Both of us bond more than ever. We went traveling, went on cruises and things like that, but the cards bonded us. And my mom also. My mom enjoys looking at the cards too. And I did a video with my mom, which if you go back and look at those, I did one with her looking at cards. And it's just, to me, cards is something that is relaxing. You enjoy it. It's fun. It gets you out of the everyday, nonsense, which is what it is, because the biggest killer in this world, James, is stress. And if you watch the news every day and you listen to all that stuff every day, you're just going to get stressed. If you listen to all these people talking about, the hobby's going to go down, pumping and dumping and influencers and all that stuff, all you do is get more stressed out. So my channel, all I show is the cards. It's all about the cards. I talk about the players. I like to talk about the history of baseball, the history of the players, talk about the cards, even if it's just taking a few minutes out of the day, for me or for you to watch something that is just going to get you out of the real world, I guess,
Right.
and get you in the hobby, because that's what it is, guys. It's a hobby. It's a fun hobby.
Right.
Focus on what you like. So that's what I've done over the years.
Right. Now, I have a question about pivoting, and when it relates to being bored with your collection. Do you think pivoting helps with maybe breaking that boredom? Because, what happens when you compile and amass, whether you're working on a set or a player run, and maybe you've collected it, and does it solve the problem with now you don't know what to do anymore with yourself and collecting? Does it break that for you, do you think?
Well, for me, if it got to a point where if I don't love it, I'm going to sell it. Because I'm getting up in age at this point, and my collecting in those days have changed. So I've gotten to a point where I'm more in actually a selling mode to get what I want. I'll sell 20 cards to get one,
Okay.
one nice card, one big card, I guess you can call it, but my goal now, and I guess my current pivot, other than, I'm going to get a lot of my vintage stuff, going through some of my nicer stuff. I'm going to get that graded and use those to go for what I call my top 100 cards. That's my new
Wow.
pivot,
Wow.
So I'm getting to a point where I'm going to essentially get rid of almost everything I have and have 100 cards.
And how did you come up with this list of 100?
Well, I haven't, what I do is I look at my best cards, my favorite cards. It's not necessarily, there has to be 100 exactly, but roughly, that's what I'm looking at. I don't want to have a collection of cards that I never look at anymore. I don't want to have stuff that's in closets all the time. I want to have some cards where I can display, look at them, keep them in one place, and this is my collection, and that's kind of at the point where I'm at, because I'm at the stage where, I'm already retired. So what's going to happen after I pass away. My wife, she doesn't know, she knows, but she doesn't know a lot about this stuff or the value of a lot of this stuff. So if you keep it raw, she'll never know what the value is. If you grade it, at least now I've been able to teach her and show her, look, it's a 7, and this is what it could go for. So I think that's going to help also, when I eventually pass away or when I decide to sell them, because I probably, if I'm need the money, eventually we'll do that. But 100 cards basically is what my list is being right now. And everything else is going to eventually go away. I'm going to sell it to get to those 100 cards, but they're going to be an incredible 100 cards, James, I'm telling you. And I'm building them now.
Trim the fat.
I'm almost there. And it's not all baseball now, because I do collect some football and I do collect some basketball. Not much of it, but there will be some included in there.
Right. And so I was just wondering, you advise with people to maybe do what feels right to them, right? Pivot with what your style is, your personality, and it all changes over time. Like, we all mature in life. We all change who we were from our 20s to our 30s to 40s, so on and so forth. So do you think like your collecting style evolves, and for that you pivot?
Yeah, you evolve as a person. What you collect in your 20s is not the same thing you're going to collect in your 40s, and not the same thing you're going to collect in your 60s. Everybody's kind of different. I mean, I love ripping wax. And when I was a dealer back in the 80s and 90s, boy, I ripped a ton of wax. That was my thing, ripping wax, building sets, finding the key players and selling those, at the shows or wherever, And, for me, it was building the set, so I'd open tons of wax, and that's where you start. But I think it gets to a point where you say, you know what, I've got to, I'm growing, I'm changing. I don't need to have, in those days, 10 Jose Canseco rookies, I don't need to have, 4 or 5 Ken Griffey Jr. rookies, So you end up selling those, and you move into, stuff that you really, really want. So essentially, I sold all my doubles, everything I had, and moved to some of the rarer stuff that, I enjoyed. And I focused on that and was able to get those cards in good grades, because I was able to move on with the other stuff. But, you still, there's one set I'm still working on other than that 71 Topps football. And that's my autographs. And I mentioned before that I do like autographs, and I was an autograph collector. And at one point I had a lot of autograph cards where they autographed on the card themselves. I mean, I did end up selling those, unfortunately, to get other stuff. I had for example, I had a 54 K-Line rookie autograph, which K-Line autographed it for me.
Oh, wow.
And I had a bunch of other ones, but I ended up selling all those. And I got into the press deal, and I completed the press deal celebration set, all autographed with all the Hall of Famers. And about 10 years ago, I started with the football. I don't know how familiar you are with the football. These.
Oh, wow.
These are the goal line art cards, and they're similar to the press steel.
Okay.
They're kind of similar to the press steel. There's the
wow.
Jim Brown.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And they're limited to 5,000 cards. Here's the Marino.
Oh,
and they're limited to 5,000, and they're given out by the Hall of Fame, and you get them autographed. And this set actually started back in 1989. And this is one of the longest running sets ever, I think, from 1989 to 2016. So they sold those sets at the Hall of Fame. They were limited to 5,000. In those days, 5,000 limited cards were like big, even the ones that you pulled from packs, But you buy them from the Hall of Fame and you get them signed. And I started collecting that probably 10 years ago, and the set went from 1989 to 2016. And every Hall of Famer, every inductee in the Hall of Fame, they created. Gary Thomas is the artist of this, and Gary Thomas is like Dick Perez of Perez Steel. He creates most of the artwork for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. So he created those every year up to 2016. A total of 303 Hall of Fame football players. Now, not all of them could be autographed. You know, of course, you can't get Jim Thorpe and players like that. But there were 246 that could actually be autographed. You know, they were living at the time that these were printed. So I'm going to finish off as much as I can of this set. I now have 221 Pro Football Hall of Fame autographs on these postcards.
Wow.
So that is my final set, autograph set. I sold off all my other autographs pretty much, except for that. I mean, I have some other autographs still, some Cuban players, and I think I might have shown you this one before of Minnie Minoso, 1953 Bowman. Minnie Minoso autograph. I love it. The autograph right on the bat. So I still have some autograph cards, but for the most part, I just collect the football autographs that to finish my set. And I'm collecting more of the old pre-war stuff from the early days of baseball, you know, 1900s, 1800s, and early 1900s.
Wow. How long have you been doing YouTube?
I started YouTube in January. Okay. My daughter said, you know, you need to show your collection. You know, you love your collection. You're always looking at your cards, and you know, you should do YouTube. She's the one that suggested it, and then I got inspired to go ahead and do it. So I started in January. She actually set me up. I don't know. I'm not a technical guy. As you see, my videos have zero editing in there.
Right.
And I'm doing this live just from my iPhone. So I don't know how to do any of that. I'm not on Instagram. Everybody's asked me if I'm on Instagram or I'm on Facebook. I'm not on any of that. My daughter isn't that. She set up my channel. She set up and did my first video and said, Dad, this is it. All you got to do is record the video and put it on. And so I started in January.
So almost a year. Almost a year.
Yeah. 10 months. 10 months now.
I have a question pertaining to that. While you've been doing YouTube and getting acclimated and getting to know the community, has any of the members or watching videos ever like influenced you to want to pivot to something else?
Not really.
No.
You know, I mean, I pretty solid in what I'm looking to do at this point. You know, you look at these videos and sometimes, you know, you do get lured by some things, and, you know, you want to go look at some Marvel cards or something and things like that. And I actually had some little bit of Marvel cards, and I actually had a few other little oddball stuff that I ended up finding. Let's see if I can find some of that here. But anyway, no, I don't. I'm the type of guy that I'm very focused in my collection. I've always been a very focused person, and I'm focused in what I'm doing, and I don't stray. You know, I'm not buying Star Wars cards, even though I had a few from the 77 Star Wars I found. I don't do any of that stuff. You know, Mangini does tempt me a lot when you see his stuff, of course. When you see other people's stuff, you know, you always want that. Oh, God, that's a beautiful card. I wish I had that. But, you know, I go with the stuff I really love, the stuff I really like, and I just go with that. I'm pretty much very difficult to. I'm focused on what I want, and I'm heading to the end of my collector's dream, which is my top 100 cards. I'm in a selling to buy my top 100 cards mode right now.
So where are you with that collection? Like, Do you have 30, 50 of them out of your top 100? Like, which is probably the biggest card if you want to share? I don't know if this is something you want to share.
Well, I already have my technically a top 100 cards,
Okay.
except some of the ones that are down 75 and below. I'm not. Yeah, I could probably sell some of those. Some cards that maybe are not. As I was trying to pull some out, but just not as nice to me as I really want. I mean, there's just cards I'm not that interested in anymore. I do have over 100 slabs, and I want to keep 100 slabs, and I'll sell some of the ones to the lower 50 to get the upper 50. So talking about my top cards, I mean, yeah, of course, my 52 tops value wise is my most expensive card, but it's not really my favorite card, to be honest with you. I have my favorite. I'll show you a couple of my favorite Mano cards. Let me get a good look at that. This one.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite Mano cards. So it's not necessarily the most expensive one I have, but it is I will tell you right now, and I'm putting in my video tomorrow, this is my favorite Mano card.
And
I love this Mano card. I love just the image of that, the background. It shows them, like Yankee Stadium back there, and I love that. And another one of my so the 52 Mano to me is my third favorite, and my second favorite Mano is this one here. I love the 53 Bowman.
Wow.
And I love it because it's the first one with an actual photo of the Mick.
Right.
So you get a good look at Mano there. I'm trying to see you don't get anything. And I just love that 53 set. And I love the Mano card in that set. It's just a beautiful Mano.
I think I think that set is gorgeous. And I agree with you with the 53 tops. It's one of his most beautiful cards of his. I personally love that card myself. And I just it's amazing that you have so many high-end cards. Do you find yourself upgrading a lot when some come across you and you can afford to upgrade?
No, I'm done with my upgrading at this point. What I have is what I have, and I'm looking now. I did a lot of upgrading in my Goodwin Champions set. That took many, many years to put together, and I did a lot of upgrading, and I'm still looking to do some upgrading in that set because it's just so rare. And, I still have a lot of the tennis players in that set graded, 3s or 4s, and I would love to upgrade those because there's nothing more than 5s or 6s. So it's real tough. But as far as upgrading, once I get a Mano card, that's it. I'm not going to get 2 or 3 of them and get another one and trade this one up. I'll move on to another one of my, another card that I'm looking to get. So, look, I would love to upgrade. I've got my 51 Bowman Mantle in a 3. I would love to get, a 5 or a 6. Unfortunately, they're unaffordable at that price right now. But it is what it is. I got a 3 and mine's got a little stain on it, and I'm happy with it. I'll stick with it. So I don't really upgrade cards. I look to get a new card that I do not have.
Okay. So now that we've discussed the aspects of pivoting, you've discussed how you've evolved throughout your time of collecting. Where do you think overall the hobby is right now, from where you've watched it from the 70s all the way to now? All the changes, how do you see it now?
I kind of see it a little bit like almost reverting back to a semi-junk wax era, where first there was Topps, and then Fleer and Dunross and Score and Pro Set. All of a sudden there was tons of different brands, and that's what's happening now. And then they started with the inserts back then, you know. And now it's just gone crazy. I just see it to a point where there's just too many brands, too many inserts, too many parallels. It's too much confusion, I think, for the hobbyist. And this is where the hobby is going to take a big pivot, just like the pivots from the 19s, from the junk wax era. There's going to get to a point that a lot of these base cards or cards from these new rookies and new players are not going to be worth what they're worth today, And, I'm not telling people what to do, because if you love those cards, go for them and get them. But in my opinion, I think we're reverting back to a similar to a junk wax era where 90% of the cards today are probably going to be worth less than $5.
Wow, that's interesting. I find that it's going to be interesting to see where Fanatics is going to take over. That might, change things, whether they're just out for the money and they're just going to throw out just a whole bunch of craziness, or maybe they'll streamline it and make it better. And because Topps is just like, they became a cash cow with these cards, and they just like, it's a joke now.
It's a joke. And then not putting the short print cards in there. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. The problem is that, I'm a little scared with, with what's happening right now. But I do feel that, Fanatics is going to consolidate the hobby, and it's in their best interest to make sure everything goes well. They've put in billions and billions and billions of dollars. I think we're going to start seeing commercials and marketing coming on. Like, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s and 90s, they actually had commercials about baseball cards, and they're going to have that again. And it's going to be, a lot of marketing. I think they're going to push their product a lot. And, it's great for the hobby overall. I think all that stuff is going to help the hobby. But, I'm worried about the young people. Can they afford it? What are they actually going to be able to collect? Is Fanatics and Panini, what are those guys going to offer those young collectors? And without the young collectors, we all started. I mean, most of us started when we were young kids. And without the young collector, this hobby doesn't have much to go. You got to get the young collectors. And one of the things that I want to do in my channel is show the young collectors options, and show them, and teach them the history, so they are, almost become a fan of the history of the game. And that'll, normally lead you to right into the actual older players and the vintage and the history and the game, not just fall for all of this hype and stuff that's happening now.
Terry points out, I see a gambling element to the hobby that is here to stay. And what's funny about that statement is, coupled with what you were saying with the young collectors maybe being priced out, it's funny because you see them all with Pelican briefs having high-end, like Justin Herbert RPAs. And I'm like, how did you get this card? That's like a $30,000 card. They sell that card, and now they have $30,000 to go spend on all these other cards. So it's weird how we feel bad for the young collectors. Meanwhile, they're the ones holding these expensive Pelican cases that just blow me away sometimes.
No, and you see that it shows, and you see it on the videos, and some of the big YouTube channels, that's what it's all about, moving that big card, if you look at all these, I don't want to criticize any YouTubers, but the bottom line is that, in my opinion, most of the guys that have huge, subscribers, the Mojos of the world, and all those guys, the Daps and the, who they all are.
Right.
Those guys, that's what they promote. And they show kids like that doing that, and even Jeff Wilson and his son, and you see that he's got the Pelican case and he's selling these cards or trading these cards and thousands, but that worries me, because they're focusing on the Justin Herberts and the Josh Allens and the Zion Williamsons, and that's all. That's their whole world. And if that's going to be your world, I don't know what's going to happen 2-3 years from now. You know, if Zion is no longer in the league, which let's have hope not, but you never know. You know,
He's
or if
looking
something
good so
happens
far.
to, look what happened to Tua. You know, I'm a big Dolphin fan, and who knows what his future lies. And you've invested tons of dollars in Tua, and yeah, I'm sure maybe you could have sold a big card and made a lot of money out of it, but it's fool's gold, in my opinion. It's gambling and it's fool's gold.
Big T states, it seems like young collectors or investors use cards like they're day trading. They don't hold it
Exactly.
longer than 30 days. And John Mangini also states in chats that I'm in a chat room with him. He says that they basically flippers just it's like a Ponzi scheme. They just trade it, they sell it to each other, and they keep the market going that way. I don't know if that can last. That mentality where you just want the big card and you want to see how much you could pump it for and sell it for, and get the next hot hype before pump that. And that's not collecting. And us, we're true collectors. We don't worry about that. We collect what makes us happy. Like you said, on a day you're not feeling well, you're sick, it's a rainy day, you pull out the binder and you start admiring the stuff you've accumulated. And we're collectors. And it's healthy to pivot. It's a way to honestly keep collecting, because me personally, when the pandemic hit and a lot of the cards that I was working on just went out of control, I was like, well, I can't be spending $2,000 per card because I'll never be buying anything. So I started the MVP run, because a lot of those cards could be had for $1, $5, $10. And I had fun cherry picking what I wanted. And that was fun. And then after that, I started working on other collectings. While I still had my 500 home run club, I'm thinking about doing the 3,000 hit guys, Cy Young Award winners. But those are all pivots that eventually are like my plan Bs and plan Cs. And that's how I enjoy the hobby. I don't really follow this pump and dump stuff. Sometimes I'll look at videos and I'll see people show something that I'm like, whoa, that's a cool card. And they kind of like pique my interest, where I'm like, let me see what that goes for. But aside from that, I have my lists and I work on that. And sometimes I take a hiatus from buying. Like right now, the 52 set that I'm working on, I took a step back. It's just like, all right, Christmas is coming up and everything. I need to start cooling off with the cards. But other than that, I still love collecting. And
I mean, James, this is a slow process, guys. I mean, everybody sees everybody's cards and things, and it's taken me over 50 years to accumulate what I have. My collection. It's not something that all of a sudden, you can just go out there and get. Nobody has that kind. Well, I guess some people have that kind of money, but I don't. I'm retired. The only way I can get cards is if I sell some of my other cards. So, I mean, I guess all of us are kind of flippers in some sense, to get something better. But, it's not about flipping. It's about enjoying your collection. And that's really what everybody should enjoy. Like I said before, it gets you, or Mangini says it best, it's time to go look at some baseball cards. I've had a bad day, and you got to do that. And that's, you have to enjoy them. And, that's what the hobby is about, guys. You just cannot be thinking about oh, I'm going to lose this money, or I'm going to make this money. Look at Dylan at Double D. You know what I love about him? He did it. He evolved. He went and, he had tons of stuff, directions to go after. And now he wants to go after doing those all-star cards, every year from the 75 set and get the actual players. What a great idea, collecting Hall of Famers and things like that. I mean, I'm still trying to hit my 100 cards. There's cards that I would love to get that I'm still looking to get. And I'm going to have to sell some of my collection. There's no doubt about it. And I will. And then eventually I'll pick those cards up. I'm looking to get, Christy Mathewson.
Yeah.
Like you got.
Iconic baseball is pumping and dumping. Greg Jeffries, Kevin Moss, and Tal Van Poppel to the moon.
I'm telling you, I've got all those rookie cards in boxes that I never sold back in the days, and
They're worthless.
worthless. Tons of people like that. I mean, and you see it all the time, guys, all the time. Even people that were good. I mean, even you look at Sammy Sosa and players like that, or Juan Gonzalez, and all that, and you think, you know, they're good players, but at the end, they're not worth anything.
Terry states, it's not flipping, it's refocusing. That's an eloquent way.
Great way of putting it. It is refocusing. Exactly.
It is.
My advice is get rid of what you don't like, get rid of what you don't want, and go after what you really want. Go after your dream cards, and it's gotta get, you're gonna get a time you're gonna have to do it. People put it off, and oh no, listen, when I got my 52 Topps Mantle, I almost didn't get it. I was hesitant. It was a lot of money, even though it's an authentic card, and I got it for a great deal. And, it's a huge investment, and, but it was the card that I've always seen everywhere. It was a card I always wanted, and it's the last card I needed for my Mantle run. And I went for it. I just went for it. And I'm glad I did, because now I couldn't afford that card today. Just like you, James, you couldn't afford your 52 Mantle today if you went out and tried to get it. And yours is, I think, in a 4. Come on, you can't afford this. Unaffordable.
I had a sense back when I bought it that due to YouTube, cards were going to start escalating in value. And so I told myself, I need to get some of these immortals before I can't even approach the thought of owning them. So I just made a list of all the immortals. There's some that I regret I didn't pounce on, like Ted Williams rookie card. That one sticks in my craw. Sandy Koufax, his rookie card could have bought all day for $300 for like a nice 4 or 5. Now they're like $2,000, and I'm like, but you can't buy them all.
I'm like you. I don't have the Koufax rookie. I don't have the Aaron rookie. Those are cards I would like to have one day, but right now I'm not. They're overpriced for me unless I, sell other stuff. But I'm still going for older stuff, so I may never get those cards. And you know what? That's okay, because I know that some of the other cards that I have, I'm going to enjoy them, and I love them so much. You can't get everything, guys. You get what you can get, and you get what you like. And that's the way you gotta go for it.
Right.
I would love to have a Ty Cobb card, a T206 Ty Cobb. I don't have one. I would love to have a 33 Gaudy Ruth. I don't have that either. And so maybe those are cards that you have it. I know.
No, but are those some of your 100s? Those cards.
Those are some of my top 100 cards. I would eventually like to get those cards, knowing that I'm going to have to give up a lot to get them. But, those cards are iconic cards. And those cards, now they may be coming down a little bit in price, but they'll never go down that much. They're never going to be worthless. Those cards are always going to be worth some good money. And, but the bottom line, again, it's, I'm trading at this point, trading these cards for that card. And that's the way I look at it. That's the way I see it. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of my accumulation over these 50 years and do my top 100 and get to those cards, hopefully, that I can get in the future.
How do you turn off the love that you have for cards that you really appreciated at one time, and you consider them like trade bait afterwards? Like, how do you come to terms with that?
If the trade bait is better than what I got, and it's something that I really, really wanted, it's difficult because they're like your babies. You don't want to give it up, And if I had the money, I would just flat out buy it, but I don't. So you got to work within your means and what you have and what you don't have, uh, unfortunately, you got to give something up to get something. And look, I there's a lot of stuff that I gave up, and I can't say I regret it because I did, but I don't. I gave up my entire 53 Bowman set that I had. One of my favorite sets was my 1957 set. I gave up all of that except for just 3 or 4 cards. I wish I had some of those cards back. I gave up most of my 34 Gaudi set that I had.
Do you ever feel like reacquiring some of those cards that you gave up, the 53 or the 57?
No, because I think I moved on from some of that already. I kept the mantle and stuff like that I wanted from there, and I move on to other stuff. And I look for some rare stuff that maybe people have never seen or haven't or not familiar with in the early 1900s or the late 1800s. Let me show you something here that you've probably never seen.
Oh, wow.
You ever seen that card? That's a 1909 Cabanas card from Cuba.
Wow.
And
Wow.
These cards are very rare. They were printed in Cuba, and they were made at the time. There was a spring training. They did spring training in Cuba. It was the Detroit Tigers in 1909. The Tigers were with Ty Cobb. Of course, they were the champions. Of the league from 1907 to 1909. They went to the championship, and in 1909 they went to Cuba, and they played the Havana team and the Almendares team in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And Cuba made their 1909, their T cards, just like the 1909 T206s, same size. Let me show you the back of them here.
Wow.
And these cards they made, they're only Cuban players and the Detroit team. Now, Ty Cobb did not go to spring training, so Ty Cobb is not, there's no Ty Cobb Cabanas card, but there are Cabanas cards of the Detroit players.
Okay.
Of this set.
So like Sam Crawford might be in there?
Sam Crawford's not in there either, but a few of the other guys are. Wow. I don't remember the list. They're so rare that there's less than 10 known. There's one guy that has the entire set. His name is El Rey. El Rey has all of this stuff. And a lot of times, if you want to know more about these cards, go to Net54, the Net54 blog. And there's a collector there, Roland. Mm-hmm. He lives in Cuba. He's the biggest collector of Cuban cards. He has virtually everything, and he knows everything. And you can go on Net54. You can ask him questions. You can post your cards. He posts cards on there. And that's one of my things is I do, since I was born in Cuba, I do collect some Cuban cards, especially some of the rare stuff. Here's another Cuban card here. This is the Propagandas.
Right.
Which you've seen these. Montiel. Propagandas Montiel, 1946 Propagandas Montiel.
Right.
Cards,
I almost wanted to work on that set.
Yeah, that's a rare, tough card, tough set.
When I first got back into the hobby, I fell in love with that set. I thought it was so unique, and I considered trying to put it together because at the time, people weren't paying attention to it too much.
Yeah.
So you could find a lot of those cards $10, $20, $30.
Exactly.
Even graded copies were going for like $50 or $70. And I guess people were turned off because they were ones or authentic.
Yeah.
People didn't understand. They were so thin, like magazine paper. You had no choice to get them like that.
Let me show you how thin these things actually are. Look how thin that is. It's like a magazine paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's super. I mean, it's so thin that it doesn't even stay like a card. It just kind of,
You could roll up a cigarette with that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a piece of paper base, basically. So obviously they are going to get some creases or something on there, you know.
Right.
But it's like you say, you know, people that knew about these cards got them at a good price at a good time, and the people that, you know, are now beginning to learn about these cards, it's kind of late now to get into the game with these, you know, especially if you're going after some of the big names in the set.
I gave up a Ty Cobb at the National in
Yeah.
order to get my Christy Mathewson, and it was tough because that Ty Cobb only had like 30 graded between SGC
Right.
and PSA. So I knew I had a scarce card, but it wasn't a playing days card. I kind of rationalized how to let go of it.
Yeah, it's not like the usual card of the set, you know. That's
and then I was like, you know what? But I really want a playing days Christy Mathewson, and the back rarity with the old mill. I said, this is the one. I got to do it, and I just never turned back.
when you showed me that card at the National, I was like so impressed because
Thank you.
With the old mill back, you don't find that very often, and that's, you know, a couple of cards that I would like to get is a Christy Mathewson. I'd like to pick up a Ty Cobb, a T206 Ty Cobb. I do have the T205 Cobb, but I'd like to get a T206. And, you know, eventually, hopefully, I'd like to get a Cap Anson Old Judge card.
Wow.
Eventually, yeah, that's another one of my dream cards. So I got a few of those, but I'm, you know, I would say I'm 90% done with my collection. I've collected almost everything that I've wanted that I could afford. You know, just a few more key cards, you know, maybe 15, 20 more cards, and I'm good to go, I think.
Don't say that. Let's just say there's a lot of videos to come in the future, but let's not say you're good to go.
Well, hey, I may pivot again. Who knows? You know, I may end up pivoting after I do my top 100. You never know what happens in this hobby. And that's the fun thing about it. You know, you can do anything you want. It's your hobby. It's your collection. And, you know, it's for your enjoyment. So enjoy it.
Right.
Don't worry. Forget the money aspect of it, guys. Enjoy the cards and look at them. Don't just put them away. Just enjoy them.
Scott says Christy Mathewson paintings are hot right now. You need to go see Scott's latest video of him drawing that Christy Mathewson acrylic painting for Rick. Such a beautiful piece. So that's a way of having a T206 Christy Mathewson, is having Scott draw one for you.
I am so impressed with Scott and the things that he's done. I mean, he is just one of the greatest artists that I've seen. I mean, sports artists like that. You know, you really got to. I just admire that so much. One day, Scott, I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Whenever you have some time, let me know.
Well, should we end this with maybe you sharing some of your last minute cards that you want to share, like some fire, like last minute rapid fire? It's up to you.
I don't know. I mean, I've shared a lot of stuff. I think I don't know what else.
It's up to you.
I don't want something else that I haven't shared. You know,
I don't want to take anything away from future videos that you're holding out.
No. I mean, I was, you know, some of my original collection, you know, from the first set I pulled these out of packs. You know, I just wanted to show you guys some of these.
Nice.
These were pack pulled back in 1970. You know, pack pulled back in 1971.
Beautiful.
Just some older stuff. A 72. You know, I've shown my sets in my videos of 1970, 71, and I'm probably going to show my 1972 set sometime soon. And I just love the 72 cards with the kind of a disco, you know, it's for the era.
Right.
One of the most unique cards for that era, you know,
right.
Because in those days, Topps was doing the boring stuff, you know, like this, you know, which is basically just a border and a picture. And then they went to these little fancier stuff.
They had a lot of character with that card. It's one of the most iconic I think between that one and the 71 are both of the most iconic for the 70s in
Yeah.
my view. And it's like alternate, like alter egos, because you got the black, which is hard to find with minimal chipping. And
Yeah.
then you go to that one, a plain black, to that one with so much vibrant colors all
Yeah.
over the place. It just pops.
Yeah, I tell you, I just love some of the 70s sets. You know, the 70s sets are some of the sets that are kind of overlooked.
Mhm.
People look at the 60s and the 70s are kind of overlooked. And let me tell you, there's some pretty nice sets out there, especially the earlier 70s. But as far as my YouTube channel and my videos, I mean, tomorrow I'm gonna release my 5 favorite cards, which I've kind of shown you some of them, but I want to tell you in order which are my favorite cards
Okay.
in my collection. Not my most expensive, but my favorite. And no, I plan on going to a card show this weekend, so I'll probably film that a little bit. So I'm doing a little bit of filming at the. I want to try to hit some more of the local card shops here, so people can experience a little bit of that here, the local card shops. Unfortunately, very little vintage in these card shops, but I'm going to hit them up, and I'm going to hit up some card shows. And this weekend on Saturday, I'm going to go to the small one here at the Roadway Inn in Dania. Check that out. Anybody want to join me there? You'll see me there, hopefully.
Now, I
And
find
so I'm just putting more of my cards, more of my collection on video. I got some cards coming from ComC to finish up that 71 set, the football set, and a couple other of my sets. I'll video that as soon as I get that. And showing more vintage cards and showing some more old stuff.
wow, you have a great channel. I love it. I love that you incorporate a lot of your knowledge with either the set or the players, and it shows your passion and your knowledge. And a lot of the stuff you have is so rare. It's almost like with any other of the big channels with Rick or John or Dave, Blue Jacket 66. It's just you're just gonna see something that blows you away, or you're gonna learn something. And that's what I love about your channel. I was introduced to you by George Diamond Yard. He told me, "You don't know a collector's dream, Orlando." I'm like, "Bro, why? How am I supposed to know him? I'm supposed to
Yeah.
type him in. Like, if you don't tell me, I won't know." And he
Yeah.
tells me, and I'm like blown away. Like, "Oh my God, this guy's collection is unreal." He's like, "I told you."
Yeah, I don't show my face in my videos, so most people are never going to recognize me, which is good with me because I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the cards and the history, and that's what I talk about. And the best thing about this I found is just the community. George and Dave from Blue Jacket 66 and Vince. I mean, New York Yanks fan helped me so much, and Ryan from Breakout Cards is another incredible guy that. And you, and of course Lou Rock, and Mangini, and I mean I could just go on, and it's just a ton of people. From I mentioned Dylan before, and Wade Boggs fan, and I mean I can go on and on and on, and all the people that have commented or I met at the National. That's what the hobby is all about, guys. Making money is great if you can make money doing it, but the bottom line is enjoy the hobby, people. Like the Pino Man says, enjoy the hobby.
That's what I love. I guess that's a great way to put the icing on the cake, is that this community that's brought us together could take someone like you who's been like just hidden away, without even any knowledge that you have such a nice collection, others from across the map, and it brings us together, and we're like friends and buddies. At the end of the day, we're learning, we have this camaraderie going, and we all collect differently, but we appreciate each other's collections and our collecting ways, and we understand. I might not be like Nate, where I do a player collection, or John Wayne Boggs fan, but I get it. I know what it's like to scratch off more and more rare, and then when their eyes light up when they're looking at it, it's the same like when I'm looking at one of my cards or you're looking at one of your cards. it never gets old. Or Dylan, like when he first came on the scene, I learned of him from Nate. It was like a cherry. That's the word that I would always remember with Dylan. Oh, look at this card. It's so cherry. But I get it. That's the best thing about it, is when you see the just the passion and authentic passion from these collectors. Jim, I love Jim. He gets his card from Dylan and he loves it. He didn't care what he got, but it's from Dylan's collection. And he's happy. And it's a Yankee, by the way. I'm just putting it out.
Hey, and don't forget Adam from Vintage Sanctuary.
Yeah,
I love Adam. He's a great guy, and his videos are just great. And you know what? What I love about his video is it's relaxing. Relaxing videos. You look at cards, and he almost puts you to sleep in a good way, I guess.
His voice is like so soft and soothing. It's just crazy.
And that's what it's all about, guys. It's just relaxing and enjoying your cards. So that's what's fun.
I guess that's a great way to end this video. So guys, I want to thank you all for joining us. All the people who commented, so many names in here. I don't want to name them all because I know I'm going to forget one. It'll be almost like a diss to whoever I forget. But I want to thank you all for watching. Orlando, thank you for joining me and discussing this topic of pivoting that basically encompass your whole life with collecting, and it was fun to hear about it. And I hope it maybe gives people a new perspective that they could maybe trim the fat or trade something that they're not in love with anymore. Don't be afraid to do it. I do it. A lot of people do it. If it's not for you, it's not for you, but there's no rules to it. Just enjoy it.
That's right.
Yeah. So any last words, Orlando?
I think you said it all, James.
Catch Orlando at A Collector's Dream. Sub him up if you're not subbed up to him. It's a treat. You won't regret it. And with that, I'm going to wish everyone happy hunting when it comes to cards. I want everyone to stay safe, be blessed, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.